Melin, thank you for making time.
Hi Gladys, so nice to talk to you again.
Yes. Super excited. You are the first Harvard student to come on the show. So you will tell us all things about the college. You will tell us how to get to Harvard, because it has a crazy acceptance rate, which is like, is it 3% or 2% or 1%? What percent?
2 to 3.
Damn. So you are like, my goodness. Yeah. So you're like a cream, like top student, obviously. One of the top students from around the world that were accepted to Harvard, which is exciting and commendable, and congratulations on that. So, Melin, take it away. I want you to tell us about what are you studying. So, and maybe just, I don't know, generally, how is it like at Harvard?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, just to kind of clarify, like set the ground for things. Harvard University is kind of now the umbrella term for all Harvard schools. Harvard has more than 12 graduate schools, and so the college is the undergraduate school for students, and then we have the Harvard Business School, the dental school, medical school, but then the umbrella word or kind of term for all of these schools, they all fall under Harvard University.
Okay, good. Yeah. So the college is for undergrad.
Just for the undergrad, yes.
Okay. Take it away, Melin. Tell us about what are you studying at Harvard? Which year are you? How are classes like when you wake up in the morning? Do you go to class every day? How are the classes structured?
Yeah, sure. So I am a junior, which is third year for college in the US. I study economics, global health, and health policy, and I love it. I say that most of our day-to-day is spent, a big chunk of it is spent studying. I mean, you'll infer from the fact that it's Harvard, so I think we spend a lot of time studying, doing research, meetings, extracurriculars. But I think all these things kind of shape you to become the person that you ever want to be. I'd say that on a typical day, so for example, on a typical Tuesday, I'll wake up, have breakfast, have class at 10:30, and then do some little work here and there, have a few meetings for my extracurricular clubs and activities, and then have afternoon classes, have dinner with friends, because I love to keep my social circle going, and then have a kind of late night walk sometimes by the Charles River, because it's really beautiful, especially now that it's almost spring, which is my favorite season, and then just have a late night library session, and we'll call it a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you were telling me the breakdown of the semesters. So how are the semesters around the year?
Yeah, so I think this varies depending on different schools in the US, but at least for our school, we just have 2 semesters. So our fall semester begins around end of August to mid-December, when we have like our final exams, and then we break for winter break. So that's the end of one semester, and then winter or spring semester begins at the end of January and runs through mid-May, where we have finals and then break for summer break, and summer break is mostly between mid-May and end of August. So that's kind of like how we study. And we have a 1-week break for spring semester in between around mid-March, and we have Thanksgiving break in the fall semester around end of November to beginning of December.
Is it rigorous? I guess it is, but yeah, tell us about how the rigor of studying at the college.
I think it is, and also even regardless of what you study, I think the rigor is something that's present. And even compared to my pre-college experiences in Kenya, I would say that this is more rigorous, demands more of ownership of your work, more of initiative, being more proactive, reaching out to professors. Harvard, when I came here, I think something which was very new to me was that the teachers who teach me are the best in their field globally. Most of my professors are globally acclaimed in their different fields, and it's interesting, but also it can be very intimidating to be taught by such. But also over time, you get to realize that they're actually very approachable, very much willing to help students, to inspire students, and have a chat. And so showing up for office hours and getting to really know, how did you get into this field, and what do you think about this specific topic. I think it's just been interesting. I think one of the highlights of my experience is just being able to meet academic celebrities while I'm here.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. I mean, being one of the top unis around the world, I'm not surprised. That is interesting and great. And I mean, I was asking about the rigor, but I also know that you are a brilliant student, determined, and I'm sure you are up to the task. So that is good to know. Tell us about Because you're also passionate about extracurricular or out of class activities. So if you can touch on that, what do you normally do outside classes?
Yeah, so I say outside classes. So I have a lot of interests. They are far and wide. Prior to coming to Harvard, I was really interested in the healthcare sector, mostly being in theater, being a cardiologist. But then coming to Harvard, I'd say that my interests have evolved now. I have a lot of interests. All of these lie kind of at the intersection of climate and global health and health delivery. And so most of my activities, my extracurricular involvements are kind of structured around that kind of intersection. Outside of class, I do research. I'm a research assistant at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, and the current research that I'm working with a research fellow just focuses on trying to really understand the global climate governance landscape from the perspective of the UN Convention of Climate Change and the effectiveness of the negotiations. So thinking about something like the Paris Agreement, how effective was it, the Green Climate Fund. So that's what I'm up to. And apart from that, I'm also involved. I do independent research at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, and my current research focuses on the effectiveness of the government mitigation and adaptation strategies to combat, in reference or kind of like in lieu of the recent floods in Kenya in March to May 2024. So I'm trying to understand how effective was government intervention in addressing that, and how did the floods have disproportionate impact, especially to individuals who come from economically vulnerable communities.
Oh my goodness, you're doing a lot, and I like the fact that you are like leaning towards research, which is interesting. I wonder if is it like, is your course, imagine it has research prong or research bucket to it. Is it like that across most of the courses, like the research aspect, researching a lot?
Yes, I think most of the courses are research based, and there's a lot of like emphasis on getting to do research and getting to have hands-on skills. It's not a requirement, but these are just the fact that when you realize you have certain interests and you want to pursue them outside of class. So for example, because I study economics and health policy, I never get to study sustainability in the classroom, and so I've decided to kind of explore that interest by taking on research, independent research, or like research assistantship positions to kind of make sure I'm also well informed in the field. Research is not a requirement per se in the classes, but it's highly encouraged because it allows you to gain hands-on skills, which might be translatable when you're applying for internships or full-time job offers. And so for me, for example, because I study economics and global health policy, I never really get to explore the sustainability interest that I have. And so getting to undertake research roles in like sustainability, climate change gets me involved and makes sure I'm well versed in the topic, even though I don't really engage with it from an academic perspective, like in the classroom.
Interesting to know about the heavy research that you're doing. Amazing. And I imagine, I think you mentioned earlier that you would want to do graduate school. So I think all these research interest will feed into that.
Yes. I really hope to pursue most of my graduate school working along climate, health delivery, global health. How does climate change disproportionately affect people who are economically vulnerable or racially marginalized? So that's kind of where I hope to be.
All the best with that. All the best with the application. So you said you are a junior. How long is the program?
My program is 4 years, so I have 1 more year left.
Okay. So it looks like then you are like you've I want to say you've thrived like through the uni, and you are almost clearing out. When you reflect back, what would you say? What would you say is, I know you had spoken about the highlight of meeting these celebrity or well-renowned professors at Harvard, but what is another like highlight when you look back?
I say there's so many. One of the things which constantly surprised me is how much I was able to do things that I've never thought I would do. I think much somebody can do if they give it a try. I got involved in fashion shows, and I actually excelled in some of them. I got to like model for different cultural events, showcasing like the diversity of the culture at Harvard. I got to do that, and apart from that, I realized I love to cook, and coming from the coast, we are very good cooks.
Yeah.
So I love to cook biryani, pilau, chapati, and I decided to kind of be able to cook for like specific like African events, just because it's been a passion of mine, and now I'm trying to see how I can establish that passion to be something that can really turn into probably a business in the coming future. But then just getting to imagine myself doing that. I remember I was telling my mom, and she was like, you were cooking for an event. That's a whole full circle moment, and it shows just how much growth and how much I've been able to kind of diversify myself, really understand myself, explore new interests. There's so many highlights, and also like getting to meet some of my favorite people that I looked up to. There is Dr. V. Katibu. I've always wanted to meet her, and I got to meet her at an MIT African event. And if I didn't come here, obviously I would not have met her, and so many other people. And I think this is all like a testament to just how much beyond the academic part of coming abroad to study. There's so much growing, so many things to do, so many things to explore, and just so much to kind of absorb and learn from.
Wow. And I really love that you are looking for these opportunities outside class. I think they will go a long way in terms of not only like aiding and facilitating your career, but also just like general like personal development stuff.
Yeah.
What are, you mentioned about research a lot as some of your out of class activities. Do you do anything? You've mentioned fashion.
Yeah.
What are and cooking? Are those some of your like outside class, outside work kind of hobbies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so because I really got to realize that, in my free time, I need to find activities to keep me going outside of reading books. And so specifically in my sophomore year, I was able to really kind of explore cooking. And for the fact that I also got to intern at a company, and I was in Seattle, so that means I was living alone. I didn't have a dining hall next to me, so that really pushed me to kind of use YouTube to learn all the meals I've always dreamed of learning. Now the time was here, the resources were here, so that really made me to really explore my interests further. And apart from that, I'm part of a book club, and I'm also a mentor. The Radcliffe Institute has a program which is called Emerging Leaders Program, which really matches Harvard College students with high school sophomores in the greater Boston area who are passionate about effecting social change. So we guide them through how to create a social change project, how to implement it, and that experience has been really fulfilling. And apart from that, I'm also a peer advising fellow for first year students. So first year students, of course, face so many challenges when they're transitioning to Harvard, school, social life, how trying to fit in, trying to find your own path in a place where it seems that sometimes the path is just laid for you and you have to kind of follow through that. So I try in my peer advising sessions to really change that narrative and to kind of advise all the first years. I have a group of 10 first years who have been kind of mentoring them through the course of an academic year, and I try to really encourage them to chart their own path, find the path, and just chart it through and follow it through, because that really is success in itself. And that role is also very fulfilling because I get to live through the experiences of other first years, and I get to give back because my first year experiences were really shared by the people who went before me, the Kenyan community I found, and the people I knew before coming to Harvard. And so it's always very important for me to give back and also really inspire the next generation. And so this has also kind of motivated my interest in peer mentorship and just offering guidance in general whenever I can.
Wow, you're doing a lot. That is commendable. So you keep doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is impressive. Million, what are the challenges? You mentioned that you are helping these students to transition through the challenges, and I can imagine there are a ton. But like in your own experiences when you landed at the college, so far I imagine maybe most of the challenges were like during your first year. But like what are some of them? Maybe top two challenges or things that you wish you had been warned about or be prepared well before?
Yeah. Oh, there are so many challenges.
Okay.
Have the time for that, but I could say in a nutshell. So first of all, some of the memories which have forever stuck in my mind is when I landed in Boston. After one day my phone shut down.
Why?
I didn't have a phone for like 48 hours and I had to go purchase another phone. But I'm glad that our school gives us a startup grant to, help us settle in and get to purchase the necessities. But I was also really supported by the Kenyan community. Shout out to them. So that is one challenge in itself already. But I'd say that, actually English is hard. English is actually hard from the point that I was used to British English for so long. And so when I was writing essays and I'm writing realize with an S, I'm writing color with OUR, and my expos professor, expos is just an introductory writing class offered for first years at Harvard. And she was like, oh, Marlene, I think this has to change. So that was something that I had to constantly kind of adapt to. And it was a constant reminder that, yes, this is such a whole new system. And apart from that, it took a while. It took a whole minute to really figure out what my professors were saying, just because by virtue of living in Kenya for so long, for all my life, and being used to British English, sometimes it takes a minute for you to really understand what people are saying. But once you get the hang of it, then you're good. So these are some of the major challenges. But also, apart from that, we in Kenya, and even in my university, in my brief time at a university in Kenya, we really did not understand what office hours meant. But here, students who grew up here and went to high school here know better how to utilize professors to get recommendations. Students are more informed on how best to cultivate the professor-student relationship, how best to partner with the teaching fellows. And that is something we really, I say, we were underexposed on by virtue of just being in Kenya. And you know how our education system is like. And so that is something that I had to teach myself, talk to people about. And that is really something that most students have to cope with, like how to build the social relationships. And something else is also, we could talk about the social life for hours, but in Kenya, we're just used to having our family around, our friends around, the friends we grew up with. But again, in a new environment, you have to be very proactive in seeking relationships, maintaining relationships, dealing with crazy schedules, and trying to figure out a time to meet with your friends. And so those have constantly been things that I've been able to kind of adapt to, and also just seeing how much I've been able to grow just through, going through the whole process. I couldn't be more grateful.
Oh wow! Yeah, I like the way the way you've kind of thrived or learned through the challenges, and challenges are always there. And so I'm happy that you are figuring out how to navigate. I was laughing when you mentioned the even apart from the English, the verbs and whatever, even the nouns, right? And how things are called. Like in America, things are, the way we call things in Kenya, which I think is like British naming, is very different from the American naming of things. I was laughing because I remember when I arrived in the US sometimes back, I think was it 2021, and I was ordering food. I ordered chicken and chips, and I realized chips in America is not the chips that I know from.
Right.
And so I received chicken and crisps, and I had to
That's so funny.
Yeah, but anyways, that is interesting. So when people ask you, and you were telling me earlier that you received D, and maybe you still receive some, people tell you like, how do I get into Harvard? So when people ask you how to get into Harvard, what do you tell them?
And first of all, I'm surprised, and I think of them as very outgoing people. Just if I could take you back to my story, when I was in high school, I did not know about Harvard. And that is crazy to say, but the environment you grow up in can limit the exposure you have. So I did not know about Harvard. I only heard about Brown University just because, for some context, I was in Maryhill Girls High School. It's in Kiambu. And so during my time there, I remember there was a girl who was, I think, 3 years ahead of me. I was in Form 1. She was in Form 4 at the time. I'm so glad we met in the 1 year, just because she did very well in her KCSE. She was Kenya 5, I believe. And so she was admitted to Brown University. And so in Rhode Island, which is now like 40 minutes away. And she came to our school with the organization, the College Access Program, which helped her to apply. And they came, I remember seeing people I've never seen, people who don't look like me, coming into a classroom. And this girl was, the most distinguished guest ever. And she was telling us about her journey applying to colleges in the US. And I was like, wow, that should be me. I am very huge on journaling, and I think it's very underrated. I think it's very important to document our life through the highs, the lows, the dreams and everything. So I still have my high school note, my high school journal with me right here because I carry it everywhere. And I remember I journaled that on that specific day, that today these people came to our school, they talked about Brown. I had their contact numbers in the journal, and I remember they say that if you do well, if you get an A in KCSE, you should send your application and your I think your transcript, which is kind of your KCSE result slip, if I can remember very well, you should send it to that specific like email, and they can help you to kind of figure out next steps. And I never forgot that. And so from that time, given this is the exposure I had, I said my dream school is Brown University, just because that's what I know, right? And I kept that dream for so long. Then after doing my KCSE exam, I performed really well and I was so happy. But then I got caught up in the medical school saga because I remembered I still wanted to become a doctor. I really wanted to become a cardiologist. So I kind of forgot about the dream, and it kind of went back. It took a while for me to kind of reconnect with my high school self, the self who wanted to study abroad. When I got an opportunity to now reconnect with Kensup, which is a college access program organization that I got in, that tries to mentor you, give you access to resources to help you understand how application is like, how life in the US is like, and how application should look like. And so that is my journey towards the start of my application. Yeah.
Goodness. So, I have so many follow-up questions. First of all, I did not know that. I don't know if the last time we chatted, I'm not sure if you mentioned Kensup. So I know a couple of students from Kensup, but I did not know that you're a Kensup scholar.
Oh, yeah.
So and I know they are very selective. So getting into Kensup is also like, yeah, you should, it's commendable. But yeah, so, and also that you went to medical school. So like I have so many follow-up questions from that story. But yeah, so when people ask you, okay, we'll talk about that. I want you to mention about medical school and why you went to medical school and your experiences there. But when people ask you, or for the students who are wondering, is it even possible to get like the 2% acceptance rate? So what do you think makes a Harvard student? Like what do you think the school is looking for when people are applying? Because not everyone who applied will get in. So from your experiences, what do you think the college is looking for, especially for undergrads?
Yeah, I'll start with what I think US colleges, the ones that mostly Kenyans apply, they look for. I think the first thing is preparation. It's very easy to tell if somebody has spent hours and weeks on their preparation just basing on the quality of their essay. So it's just very easy to decipher by first look that this student is prepared and this student just submitted this and started drafting this 2 days before the deadline. So the first thing is, how prepared are you in your application? How much research have you done on the school to understand the ins and the outs, the cultures? Because some of the essay questions that you have to write, aside from having a personal statement that I usually submit to the colleges you're interested in, you also have to write a couple of supplemental essays, and that is really when you bring out then an academic self, the activities you've engaged in, your specific interests, your motivations to study abroad, your motivation for the things you are interested in. And so that is really when people get to have a sense of who you are. And I think that admission officers will care more to really know who you are beyond your 4.0, beyond your perfect grades, because everyone really has them, just to say that. And so I think what US colleges look for, from my perspective and from the perspective of people I've helped to apply, just by sharing my insights and my perspective on that, I think it's how themed are you? I know it's very hard to have a themed life, especially when you have our interests all over the place, I would say. But I think having a themed application and being able to write your essays or present your personal statement in a way that if someone just reads one part of it, they can tell, and then they read another part of it, they can tell, yeah, this is the same person. All this is coming down to a specific common goal. So trying to theme your application, I think, is the number one most important thing. Like, be very authentic, and it's very easy to notice if you're not authentic, if your application does not sound themed, doesn't sound like you. Some aspects look like someone wrote it, and then it's not really reflective of who you are. And I think the other thing is just that how much research, how much education have you gotten on applying to colleges, because sometimes you make very common mistakes and admission officers from these schools review them, and while that could be because you did not probably get to have a second look at everything, I think that it's just very important to really make sure you research and you understand that school, so you can talk about all the specific elements. People value distinctiveness, so being very specific. I am attracted because this school has this tradition, and this specific tradition I think might make me a good fit for it. So really getting to the nitty-gritty details. So aside from being attracted to the engineering program, aside from being attracted and being able to meet a professor who works in a lab that you are interested in, what specific thing, because everybody will say that if they're applying to the engineering program, right? But then what specific thing will set you apart? So constantly trying to look for distinctiveness in your application and having a themed application, preparing early, and as always shooting your shot far and wide. I think it's just very important to cast your net far and wide, because the application season and applications are generally very uncertain, and the people who really put in effort to diversify their options, be very open-minded. My college access counselor constantly said one thing which has stuck with me. I remember he said, don't get married to a school, don't marry a specific school, marry yourself, in the sense that just be you with your interests, and know that wherever place you land from the schools you apply to is where you really are meant to be, because you presented your best version and they were able to see how you could fit into that specific school. So let the focus be on yourself and not on the school. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a rough picture of, and I know maybe you got help or some guidance through Kensup, but when you are doing the application, how is the application like? You go to Harvard website, and then how do they require essays? How many essays? Just like a rough picture of how the whole application is like.
Yeah, so I could talk a little bit about this, because how the application, to give a quick run through of how the application works. So once I was accepted to Kensup, I remember you were trying to practice and prepare for the SAT, which we prepared for and did end up doing, because I was in the COVID era, so a lot was happening. Let's just agree, like a lot happened during that era.
Yeah.
To apply, so the common app is this app where most colleges in the US use that to kind of get their application. So you apply through common app allows you to submit one application through the early decision round. So the common app goes live on, I think, August 1, and so so most of the applications, some dates might vary, but most of the applications are due November 1 for early decision, and the decisions come out by mid-December. And so you are only allowed to apply to one, mostly one. Sometimes in different scenarios it can vary, but mostly one school during the early decision round. So that's like, you have to make sure you are very committed to that school. That's a school that you love, in the sense that if you are admitted, your decision is binding, you have to attend that school. But then if you get rejected in the early decision round, you have to apply to the regular decision round, where you can apply to 1 million plus schools, however much you are able to apply to. And those decisions come around mid-Feb for like another specific round, which is called early decision 2. You can apply to early decision 2, one more school, and also at the same time apply to regular decision, 1 million plus school, as many as you can. And those decisions usually are all out by end of March and beginning of April. So for my specific journey, again, the environment you grow in really does limit your exposure and your ambitions too. So when I got into Kensup, I was like, that is when I first heard of Ivy League after Brown, and because I stumbled across Cornell University and I found it really cool. And at that time, I remember I was really focused on applying to engineering, and I know Cornell has a really good engineering school, and so I decided to commit to my application to applying to Cornell University. Did I get in? No, I did not get it during the early decision round, which is also something that causes a lot of stress. That's why I'm saying that the application season, like the application cycle to US schools specifically, is very uncertain. That is why you have to maintain an open mind. And so when I did not get into the early decision round, that is when I got in. I decided to now apply to the regular decision round, which is very rigorous, because the deadline so you get your decisions in mid-December, and your regular decision applications are due January 1 to 5. 5. So like just in the first week of January. So that means you have no Christmas, you have no New Year. So I remember going to my grandmother's place and really grinding because this has to work. And at the time, I remember I was thinking of dropping out of medical school. So this was really like everything to me. And so I ended up applying to medical school. And at the time, I'll say that this was a life-changing moment because I got involved in other activities in the community while waiting for the results, because obviously I couldn't just sit and just pray and wait for the results to happen. And I ended up actually getting into 5 Ivy League schools and Northwestern too. I got into, in addition to getting into Harvard, I got to Princeton, Columbia, Brown, and Dartmouth. If I could count, and Northwestern too. And so of course I committed to Harvard. But I would say that throughout my journey, some of the key things which really stood out is how informed are you on the application process. There are so many resources online right now. Even I applied 4 years ago, but right now when I go back and check, there's so many Google, there's so many information you can get from Google. There's so many YouTube videos from Kenyan students studying abroad that they have made, and sometimes they feature current students. So if you are a prospective applicant, lean into the information of people who've gone ahead of you, in addition to the written information you find from like articles. Always lean into things which are familiar, because the path might be a little bit isn't for you, because that is why you have people who've gone ahead of you. And just don't give up, because as you can see, it's rocky. You don't get sometimes what you initially think, but things can actually turn out better than you thought. So that's a quick kind of run through of like how the application process works. But yeah, it's been really roller coaster, but I'm grateful.
Wow. No, thank you. I did not know. So that I'm also learning from this experience, because I did not know about the Common App. Is it www.commonapp.
Yes, and it's also an actual app on App Store.
Ah, wow. Gosh, I did not know about that. I've heard, and the reason why I've been trying to get you on here is because so personally I studied in Kenya all through undergrad and only left Kenya for postgraduate. And I think for postgrad it's slightly different kind of admission process. So I did not know a lot about undergrad, and I've gotten a few DMs asking about how to get into, especially US schools as an undergrad. I had no idea. So I've been trying to advise those students, but also I was feeling limited because I don't have the whole experience. And so you've shedded some light, and that is amazing. And Common App. So you guys in the audience, if you are thinking of applying to undergrad in the US, I think you should check that Common App and start checking things in there. Yeah. So Melen, it's good. Melin, sorry, I keep butchering your name, but we'll talk towards the end. I want us to spend some time talking about Kensup, because I like what Kensup does, and I know a few students who've gone into Kensup, and it's amazing. And I feel like many students are not aware, and like you mentioned, you are also a product of your environment. So si kupenda kwa most of the students, and I'm saying this in like Kenyan context, because I think they are in Kenya. It's a Kenyan. I think they are doing other programs, but this is like the Kenyan thing. Yeah. So we'll talk about cancer, but wait, medical school. So what happened? You went to medical school and then you decided, I'm dropping out, I'm leaving. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so
and wait, also tell us when you graduated high school. Tell us what you scored, just to shout out to your school. Yeah, tell us about what you scored, and then how did you end up in medical school?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that I've always dreamed. My younger self was always, very much intrigued by medicine. My brother is a doctor. He just graduated last year, so we're all still first gen. Yeah, so and he's my only sibling, and so we have always been inspired by medicine. We always wanted to be doctors. My brother and I wanted to become a cardiologist, and so that was my goal. Even if I had wrote in my journal that I want to, go to Brown University and study cardiology, because I also did not have information of how medical school works in the US. So I just had that as a dream. Again, information is something that I got to learn later of how this whole system works. And so when I finished my high school in Maryhill Girls High School, I scored an airplane. I was so happy. That was my dream. That is most people's dream in Kenya, I would assume, if they're in high school. So I was very grateful, and I had a really good experience in my specific high school, left with lots of connection. And this is something that I have always wanted to kind of talk about, because I think coming to the US, I've come to realize that beyond the academics, it's just important to use school as an avenue to connect to students, because you really don't know what everyone is gonna become and how they're gonna help you. So even if you're in high school and you're listening to this, make sure you connect with your friends beyond the academic level, because you really do not know where that connection might lead to, especially in a country like Kenya where you need a lot of connections. Working is very important, just saying. And so when I finished high school, I started to volunteer at a school. The school was called Vonwal. It's mostly a school for the really less privileged students. So I come from Kilifi County. Kilifi County is a marginalized county, so there is a lot of I would say the teenage pregnancy narrative, the early childhood marriage narrative, the high rate of school dropout rates. And so I decided to volunteer at this school just because I used to think that the girls who attended the school, who used to come to my church, they had this idea that they couldn't get that far with education, because if you look around you, everyone seems to have the same story. Everyone seems to have finished class 8 or form 4 and just gotten married, or just trying to just hop onto the border business, even when they had a great academic potential. So I was just trying to kind of change that narrative, and from the perspective of a girl, because girls are rare. Girls, seeing a girl who's excelled academically is almost a jewel in Kilifi, because I remember I was the only student who got an A in Kilifi from Kilifi County. And so I decided to kind of use that opportunity. I used to go to schools just because this is something I've always wanted to do. And also now coming back to the present, which I'll talk about later, I do that work at home over winter break and summer break when I get time. It's beautiful to see that is an interest. I did it even when I didn't have funding, and now that when I have more support, I'm able to have more impact. And so some of our interests really range from afar. But then coming to my medical school story, of course, my African parents who want me to become a doctor. So when I remember I got into Kensup, the program was kind of from July to September, and then we had a break, and then we had a session in October. Most of the sessions were residential, because again, Kensup is a college access program which supports students who are very much academically gifted, but then we come from low income backgrounds. So the whole goal of Kensup is really to advance educational opportunities for underrepresented minorities. So that think of students who are economically marginalized or vulnerable, and so trying to uplift their communities through education, because when you educate somebody, trust me, you educate a whole village, right? And so just coming from that narrative, I got into Kensup, and so that meant that I couldn't continue my medical school education. But then after the session was over, I went back to medical school because I need something to keep me going. And this was really a dream of mine, and I was also trying to figure it out. But I remember a shock hits you, because at some point I was like, maybe I can be a doctor in the US. I don't have to go to medical school right now. I remember I was in Moi, and it was such a beautiful experience. I treasure the memories I had in Moi. I'm just saying. And so even at that time, when I got rejected by Cornell, because I really believed I'd get into Cornell, and I was like, you know what, we have to go back. So I went back to medical school from around Jan to March, while still waiting for my regular decisions to be out, because they come out around beginning of April. And so but then when I was in medical school, something which struck me and something which really forced me to explore my interest is because when you used to go to hospital just for the lectures, because most of the clinicals and the rotation starts second year, third year, and so on and so forth, I realized that the impact I wanted to make initially might not be possible, because the health insurance is so flawed, it's not working, there's a lot of delays in even getting the medical supplies, there's not enough pharmaceutical kind of devices in the hospital. So we are really lagging behind in terms of technological advancements, the prior authorization, which is something that I've always been interested in, the fact that healthcare insurance will take so much time to approve a medical procedure, and that will lead to even death or like a really worsened health outcomes for the patient. That was really frustrating to me, and so that is how I moved from being interested in the theater part of medicine, I'd say, to being interested in the office part of medicine, which is basically thinking more broadly about what is the role of economics, how can we leverage our resources to impact the health sector without directly being involved in patient care. And so thinking more broadly about economic policies, insurance, thinking more about access to the hospital distance. So that is how I got out of my medical school bubble and now got interested in global health, thinking more broadly about economics. So because I had those interests already and they were really building up, it was a very easy decision for me to convince my parents, first of all, because I was going to Harvard. So they said yes really quickly. And also just because I knew that I'm going to pursue something which is still within my interest, but then I think this was more urgent than what I thought, because what I thought would enable me to make the impact I wanted to make in healthcare was not going to be possible, because there's this whole system, this whole part of the policy, the insurance, which was not working. And so I thought it was more timely and more relevant for me to get involved on this other end.
For sure. And I think you are thriving there, and I'm sure you'll make amazing impact on that front. Yeah. Okay. You know, Emmeline, now that I don't know if I'm now thinking that we will end this part, but I also want us to do part 2, just to do like 10 minutes crash course on Kensup for the students who are sitting Form 4 this year, or those who are just started first year, and they are watching this and they want to try their luck with undergrad abroad. So just so that they know the process, how to apply to Kensup, and they can try their luck there. So we will do like 10 to 15 minutes crash course on that. But is there anything that when you look back, just your journey from Mary Hill, all the way to Harvard, where you are now, are there things that you wish you had known earlier, or I don't know, just some lessons you'd pass down to a younger Emmeline just out of high school?
Yeah, I think there's just so much I could say, and so much I think that there's always so much to learn. But the first thing is remain authentic to yourself. The world changes, you change places, you change environments, you change schools, but ultimately you need to find a home within yourself and find a place where you are able to remain authentic to your interests. Because, for example, as I said, I started getting interested in mentorship right out of high school, and I didn't have the funds, enough resources. But then because I kept and I held and I really was able to hold on to that interest, now it's translating to something where I can make bigger impact, and really I'm just being able to explore that more. And then the other thing that I could always that I wish someone told me at that point is to really start building and developing my story, because, you know, by virtue of being at Harvard, I've done so many interviews, maybe for job opportunities, maybe for internships, maybe for grant funding. Something which has always stood out is learning to tell your story, marketing, because I view interview as a time to market yourself, like the way you market a product, so marketing yourself as a product and what value you bring. So really getting to empower other people to build, understand their story, but also being able to know how to tell that story. And the other thing which also I wish I knew is there's just so much information, and there's so many people who are willing to assist if only you ask for help. I think the culture that sometimes you grow up in, by virtue of growing up in Africa, in sometimes a conservative society, help is not something that is really like normalized. And so normalize asking for help, normalize sending cold emails, normalize everything. It doesn't hurt. The worst that people can say is a no, which they wouldn't. Maybe 40%. I guess just 40% rate you might get a no, but 60% you'll get a yes, and that will push you to the next level. So ask for help, be very proactive, and just reach out, because you can only go so far, and if you get more help, you'll even be able to go so far. And lastly, there's just so much that you can do if you give it a try. I am constantly amazed by the amount of growth I've been able to grow so much in 2 years than I did in 20 years, which is crazy. And so there's just so much you could do if you give it a try. So constantly challenge yourself, and if you do that, then the world is really your oyster.
Amazing. I will not add anything to that. Authenticity, and I loved the story of marketing, because I think in Kenya we like to keep it humble, and we don't want to share so much about what we've achieved and our mission and whatever. So that is also very important, and it's good you mentioned. So it's good to learn how to tell your stories authentically. Yes. Yeah. And like you mentioned, like trying all sorts of things. So you never know where they take you.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. So, Emmeline, is there anything else that I should have touched on, especially regarding applying to Harvard, especially, or like just US universities for undergrads? Today we were focusing on, particularly I'm thinking of, because that is the context that I know, like Kenyan students who are sitting for KCSEs this year, and they want to try US universities for undergrad. Anything else we should maybe touch on briefly before we end?
Yeah, so I just want to say that there's a lot of like college access programs which can mentor you and guide your application to applying to US colleges, and not US colleges, Canadian colleges, and even schools in the UK once you finish high school. Kensup is one of them. Kensup is great. Kensup is awesome. It changed my life. But aside from Kensup, we have Equity. So Equity is not necessarily a college access program, but Equity, as we know, provides scholarship to the less privileged students for high school. But even through that, if you register a stellar performance, so that's an A. In the KCSE exam, you are able to do an internship. You are able to do an internship in one of their different branches, and through the internship, you get an opportunity to get selected to their college counseling program, because they also have a college counseling program, which is really, really great, because they get to mostly connect you to this amazing community of students who are in different parts of the world studying. And so it's more global, not only in the US, and not only like from the US, just kind of like applying to the US alone. And so this is also recommend folks to really look into Equity. If they do well in the KCSE, they have opportunities to join their college counseling program. And also, do not let your qualifications limit your ambition. Sometimes you do not get the perfect grade, but believe me, it's more about who you are than about specific aspects of how school has defined you to be like. So your MI, don't let that limit you from how far you can dream and how far you can achieve. And that's aside from that, it doesn't mean that if you don't get into a college access program, you cannot apply to a US school. Most people have done it alone and they've been able to get in, because you still utilize the same network. You're just not in a college access program formally. So I say that even if you do not end up getting in, because that is a possibility, if you don't end up getting into any college access program, apply still. Reach out to people on LinkedIn, on Instagram. People do that, like look for their numbers, find a way to connect to people, and get the advice that you need. But there's so much information online on YouTube. There's just a lot of information, and if you are able to really leverage that and the resources and just the few people that you know, I think that would be a great step. There's also opportunities beyond the US for undergrad. There's the UK, you could go study in Hungary. There's a lot of global opportunities, so definitely open your mind. And yeah, there's just so much you could do and so much you could explore.
Amazing. And talking about Kensup and Equity, I think there is also Zawadi. I know a couple of students who have gotten Zawadi as well.
Yeah, there's also Zawadi
Africa.
Zawadi Africa. There's ESF.
Yeah.
There's a lot of organizations, but the whole point is just to guide and mentor you to the program. So definitely apply to this. If you don't get in, still apply. You have high chances of getting in, regardless of whether you are in a college access program or not. So don't give up on that dream just based on one specific factor. You still have a chance.
Yes.